Hello, and welcome to LinkedIn Live, brought to you today by Cradlepoint. I'm Bruce Johnson. I work in Cradlepoint's Security Strategy and Marketing Division, and we're excited to be with you today to talk with you about how you can uplevel your connectivity with wireless WANs, and also talk about how you can secure those wireless WANs. I'm joined today by some great panelists. We've got Bob Laliberte and Peter Silva. Bob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. I'm Bob Laliberte, and I'm Principal Analyst at the Enterprise Strategy Group, covering the networking space. Over to you, Peter.
Yep, and I'm Peter Silva. I'm Bruce's counterpart over on the Ericom side of the house for data and application security. Good to see you, Bob and Bruce.
Great. Yeah, we want to thank you for joining today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We think you'll have a lot of fun with us. We've looked forward to presenting today. We've got a couple of things. Just make sure if you've got questions, please put them in. You can just put them in the chat, and we'll some of those we'll maybe able to get to live, and others will, if we don't, we'll get back to you individually. So let me start with a short introduction to our topic today. So I want to take you back in time, back in the days of 3G and even before. Cellular connectivity, besides using it for your telephone, it kind of got its start in the data world by being the failover option for the primary router. It'd be sitting right next to the Cisco or Juniper router. And if somebody got a little bit wild in the parking lot on the backhoe, dug up the fiber or dug up your wire, then you'd still be up and running with a connection to that cellular WAN. So it's still used widely for this purpose today, but there's a few new things that we're starting to see, and actually a lot of new things that we're starting to see. For example, companies are wanting to connect up kiosks, temporary pop-up sites, also IoT devices. That's a big growing area is the connectivity of IoT devices, because some of them are up on big tall poles and they're hard to get wires up to them. And now we've got the added bandwidth of 4G and 5G. So a lot of companies are even looking at using their cellular connectivity for their primary connection. They can be up and running day one. So Bob, can you share some of your thoughts on what the impact of wireless WANs are for that modern enterprise today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Bruce. And I think the first thing that you need to consider is that these modern enterprises have really highly distributed environments. So applications are spread across not only private data centers, but also multiple public clouds and edge locations. And it's interesting because we've been tracking this with our research, and it's been interesting to see, especially like the rapid adoption of multiple public clouds. I think we tracked just public cloud adoption over a period of maybe 10 or 12 years, starting at 17% and going into 90%. And with the multiple public clouds, it was interesting. We saw a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, organizations, the majority saying they're using it, but really only using one. Just 3 years later, the majority of organizations say not only that they're using multiple public clouds, but they're using them in a meaningful way. So this is really important because all these distributed applications need to be connected. In addition to the multiple public clouds, edge computing is also becoming increasingly popular, right? As organizations look to get that real-time or near real-time insights from operations at those locations. And this is why we continue to see organizations making significant investments in SD-WAN technology, for example, so they can have direct connectivity to those applications regardless of where they're located. And as you had mentioned, right, that technology typically would leverage 2 fixed lines, MPLS or broadband, and then maybe 4G for backup. But 5G, with its increased capacity, is really changing that paradigm. And our research is now indicating that more organizations see 5G as an opportunity to be used as a primary connection, right? Especially in those areas that either don't have fixed lines or it's too costly or time prohibitive to build them out, right? That's really a big issue. In fact, what it showed was in a lot of these cases, organizations, a quarter of the organizations we surveyed were tying their edge compute deployments to 5G availability in their area.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really
Makes
significant.
a fast rollout too, right? They can be connected right from the beginning.
Correct. And the other important piece of this, though, it's not just about the connectivity, it's about secure connectivity, right? This transition to modern distributed environments means that those traditional castle and moat perimeter-based security architectures just aren't feasible for these highly distributed environments, right? It just doesn't make sense financially or operationally to deploy on-prem security in every one of those remote locations.
Yeah, and as you say, Bob, because of the dramatic change in the networks, the distributed users, locations, IoT devices, more applications in the cloud, and we are also getting more sophisticated attacks. And as you say, that perimeter-based, detection-based security model is really not effective anymore. In fact, the model's got to be pushed down to the edge, as you had mentioned. I mean, we see ransomware is up like 38%, something like that. The MGM breach was a ransomware attack. Phishing is up like 61%. And I just read an article a couple days ago about now that, right, we have the chat GPT for us to use to help us. And now there's fraud GPT for the bad guys to use. But this article was talking about that these detection systems that are tuned to look for particular phishing attacks, they can't even tell the difference between a machine-created phishing attack or a human-created phishing attack. And even with user training, 5% of folks are itchy clicker fingers as it is. So absolutely, complete agreement.
That's a great transition into our next topic. So we talked about the wireless connectivity. Now let's talk about the security model. We got to rethink security, as Peter mentioned. We got to reimagine how we do this. And so that new model is called SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. So basically, it's coming together of cloud-delivered security and software-defined WAN. So you bring those two together, and the reason it's important to have both of those in there together is because the network, the SD-WAN piece, has got to play a big piece in the security, as well as that cloud delivered security to be able to deliver it out to the edge to wherever the people happen to be working. So Peter, tell us how SASE helps companies that are leveraging wireless WANs.
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, Bruce, secure access service edge. So there's this really cool use case for Motor City car wash. So since 2000, they've been a supplier of parts and equipment and other accessories for car washes. And they even have this thing. It's a turnkey car wash solution, like car wash in a box, but it's all connected through their SD-WAN wirelessly through the Cradlepoint system. So they've done a digital transformation for car washes, and they run this data-driven approach. So they'll send the unit out. It could be branded, it might not be branded, but all the systems, so the brushes, the chemicals, the motors, all of this have sensors in them, all connected through the wireless local area network, and then obviously connected back to the main system hub, and they can control all these mechanisms from the main system. So yeah, they got zero trust access, the SD-WAN, so they can communicate to all these endpoints out there, these edge systems. And even if connectivity is lost, these edge systems can still function. And then once they come back up, or once the wide area is good, then everything gets sent back. So PCI compliant point of sale devices, everything controlled from NCX, and it's pretty remarkable.
I'll have to look at my car wash in a whole different way next time I drive.
I know, huh?
Bob, do you want to add some comment there as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great example on a couple of different points. One is you've got an organization that's turning up locations, right? The faster they can get up and running, the faster they can start generating revenue. So it's all about that accelerated time to value, and having them put together a package, not only to bundle the car wash and the car wash experience, but also having a piece of that be the connectivity and the secure connectivity back to the central location is a great example, right? And I think that's a great example of how organizations get to leverage that SASE framework of both the connectivity and the security, right, to enable their business. And the interesting part is because of the increased complexity of these distributed environments, I think it's really important to have solutions like this that drive operational efficiency. And what does that really mean? Well, when you consider the fact that organizations have reported a significant skill shortage in the security space, right?
Yeah.
This was in our research. Well, it wasn't just last year, but it was the last 6 years in a row. So organizations are really struggling, right? So that means you need to have something that's really easy to use. So, i.e., it's going to be cloud-based, so everyone can access it. And it also means that organizations, may not have that really expertise in the security space, but that a generalist can be able to use it and set up, right? Once the policies have been defined and set up for each of those locations, it's easy to replicate it across all of them. Right. I think another area that reflects this is it also has to be able to connect to IoT devices, right? So I think our research showed that top IoT priority actually moving forward is to increase wireless connectivity to support new devices that are being brought up. And I think it also means that, like you had illustrated in this, it means the ability to turn up those new services quickly to accommodate the business, but also to do so securely by leveraging those centralized security policies that I mentioned, right? So that they can be distributed remotely, both correctly and consistently to any of those remote locations.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and in their situation, uptime is literally their number one success metric. And as you mentioned, there's limited in-person troubleshooting, and then they're able to do that from the console remotely into that car wash in a box. Really cool.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's really key for driving that operational efficiency for those distributed environments. It's really going to be important.
All right, we keyed on some very important points. The distributed environments, very lean IT staff. It's very important to be up and going and quick to start getting the revenue coming in. So let's zoom in just a little bit more on the security portion of SASE. All right, so specifically what we're talking about, the way that we look at this at Cradlepoint, we break the security piece into two quadrants. That upper right quadrant we call the zero trust private access, or you might think of that as the network security portion. And the lower quadrant, we call that the zero trust internet access, or think of that as the web and the web access and the public access. So let's zoom in on that just a little bit. So Bob, you want to share some thoughts on that upper white quadrant? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Hey, zero trust has been getting a lot of attention lately. And it really marks a new approach to security. According to our research, 9 out of 10 organizations state that they've got zero trust initiatives underway. And most people have probably heard about the that saying that, I guess it's a proverb actually, the trust but verify phrase. The interesting piece around zero trust is that it's based on never trusting and always verifying or continuously verifying the source. So we've seen significant interest in adoption in zero trust for access. And specifically, that's looking at replacing VPNs. So the VPN strategy worked really well for that castle and moat paradigm, but really not effective in these highly distributed environments. And that's primarily because when you've got the VPN set up, it creates a hub and spoke network, which means it's taking and forcing all the traffic to go through those VPN concentrators in the data center. So all your data going out to a cloud app has to hairpin, or even a different private cloud has to hairpin back through that data center and back to where you are in potentially a remote location. So that leads to obviously a lot of latency, poor experiences, additional costs for the firewalls and the VPN concentrators. Secondarily, there's an issue because the VPN, again, that was primarily built for the castle and moat. And so if you had someone penetrate your VPN, once you got access across that moat, you had full access within that data center, or at least quite a bit of access within that data center. So that's kind of a huge security risk when you think about it, right? Because that blast radius gets much larger when organizations have the ability to get in there. So zero trust private access, the key differentiator with zero trust is that it creates a layer of abstraction that only allows that user or device to connect to a specific application in that private data center or private cloud. But there's no access for lateral movement. Literally, the user coming in can't see anything but that specific application. So I think that's where it really helps out, because there's no lateral movement, because I said all the other apps, users, devices are all fully abstracted. So that's really important, but not just for users, also for the IoT devices. As you can see on this slide here, right? We know that ESG, our research shows that IoT initiatives are underway and planned for the vast majority, over 80% of organizations. Yet there's so many concerns about the inherent vulnerabilities when it comes to IoT devices, specifically, public IP addresses for one. So, Peter, you brought up the MGM. I don't know if you remember, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a hack where the attackers got through by using, actually, it was a thermometer in a fish tank in a public area of a casino. And so this is something where obviously someone who was responsible thought, hey, this is great. I can just drop this thermometer in and I can connect to the Wi-Fi, so I don't have to come out to check it. But it actually, because there were vulnerabilities built in, which is often the case, right? A lot of these IoT devices, you don't have, good awareness into what the software supply chain is for them, or you don't get a software bill of materials. So it's a lot harder to understand. As a result of that, it's easier for the attackers to penetrate through those. And it's difficult because many of these aren't powerful enough to have an agent or a browser deployed on them. So you can't deploy security directly on them. You have to secure them in a different way. And that's where we see Zero Trust providing, a great upgrade from traditional VPNs, that it obviously abstracts where those applications or devices are. And it also limits the lateral movement across if a breach does occur.
Yeah, good points.
Yeah, IoT devices are often the favorite entry point of the bad guys.
Yeah, Peter, do you want to give us a little bit of detail on that, on the public Zero Trust public access?
Yeah, sure. So it's sort of the same thing. I mean, in our world, right, Zero Trust is a framework for securing infrastructure and data for today's modern architectures, of course. And usually, like, an outbound connection would go through, as you can see on that bottom right quadrant. Typically, it'll go through a secure web gateway, and these are all browser isolation, the CASB, the DLP, firewall as a service are all kind of components of this Zero Trust. So to go through the secure web gateway, and typically in those instances, the user will either get, it's either an allowed site because it's in the okay list, or it's a block site because it's in the bad list. And sometimes they'll get a warning, sometimes not. But in our world, we also like to give the option to organizations to potentially isolate the browser or isolate the web application. So instead of just, a binary good, bad, if it's unknown or even a potentially phishing site or a new site that's out there, what we can do is isolate that it's an air gap, it's a container out in the cloud just for that particular session, isolated session. And that's really like, you're protecting the user, the device, you're protecting the application and the data. And in my mind, that is true Zero Trust. It's not sitting on the device. It's not sitting on the application server. It's in a contained cloud, isolated, air-gapped container. And you can make it read-only. You can control downloads. You can control uploads.
Even if I click on a phishing attachment, you say it can still be protected.
Yeah, well, what'll happen in that, if it's an unknown site, we could just default it read only. So the person may feel the urgency in the email. They click the link. That actually will then put them into an isolated session, and we can render that site read only so that they can't even enter their username and password. So the thing about these isolated containers is you basically have these containers execute any active content. So, malicious JavaScripts, it's literally that active content coming in that are potentially the scripts that are going to run to infect the device. So you have the active content there, and you just sort of stream the pixels to the individual's browser, and they're protected for sure.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about the having that zero trust being in the access being able to prevent a lot of the ransomware attacks as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that isolation is kind of a little unique in the industry, right? There's not too many people out there that have that RBI unless they're licensing it from some of the people that do.
Yeah, and I come from a application security, application services, so the firewalls and all those things, the SSL VPNs over the years, and I would say, at first I was a little kind of iffy, like, wait, will this really? But the stuff I've seen over the last few months, it's pretty powerful and really does protect against these sorts of attacks for sure.
Yeah, and I understand there's also we can take that isolation and do it in reverse, so we can actually protect the applications from unmanaged users. So we can isolate those unmanaged users and protect our private web applications.
Yeah, so there's either isolating, doing a remote browser isolation in the cloud, or isolating the web application, so taking it off the server and rendering it there. In fact, we can even isolate things like generative AI sessions to ensure sensitive corporate information is not being added to the language learning model. There are a number of organizations who don't want, say, the Teams and these collaboration tools on their laptops. So they don't allow the clients on it, but they want to protect the sessions because they still need to collaborate. We can even isolate those the meeting sessions, and even, believe it or not, the WeChat. So, these encrypted chat sessions can either also be, proxied in this isolated container, and we're able to then see inside that encryption and remove anything. So, the reconstruction and, the disarm and reconstruct this content all the way through. So even those encrypted messages will be safe to the folks involved in that communication.
Yeah, and that's so going to be so important also as hybrid work continues to persist, right? And you've got so many people working from the home and being able to protect them, because we all know very few people turn on and fire up their VPNs because they want to have better performance going to the web directly and so forth. So having those things in place, especially our research shows almost 3/4 of organizations consider their remote workers corporate endpoints. So when you think about that, what we were talking about earlier about that operational efficiency, if you've gone from managing the network connections between your data centers, cloud, and edge locations, which might, range anywhere from tens to hundreds, maybe a small couple thousand, to suddenly now having to manage tens of thousands of corporate endpoints, it becomes a lot more difficult. So having these centralized cloud-based tools really helps organizations to streamline that connectivity and to also ensure everyone is securely connected and that the critical applications and data are protected.
Yeah. We hear a lot of deployments where it's the executives are the, kind of in that policy where anywhere they go or click on is in a isolated session to kind of avoid spear phishing and such.
Yes. All right. So there's a couple of other questions I'd like to pose to our panelists here today. So SASE sounds great, but it also sounds a little bit complicated, or from what we've read, there are some complications to it. What's a good starting point?
Yeah, I'll jump in and take that. So we've done a lot of research on this point, and it is an interesting question, because when you think about it, with SASE being the combination of SD-WAN and zero trust, there's a lot of organizations that already have SD-WAN deployed, right, prior to SASE coming around. But organizations are looking for those comprehensive solutions. So in all the research that we've done, when we ask organizations where are they starting, they tend to start on the security side. And as I've mentioned earlier, when we're talking about zero trust and VPNs, that's really one of the key areas where we see organizations starting. It's how do we upgrade our legacy VPNs and implement that zero trust. So like I said, everyone's got a zero trust initiative underway that's all encompassing, but where they can start, especially as we mentioned with the hybrid work still being very prevalent in our society today, that's a great area where organizations can get started on that side, moving to some of the isolation, things like that. Those are all other great areas. That's what we're seeing. So typically, like I said, a lot going on, a lot of things to bring together, but typically organizations will start on that security side. And now, Peter, are you seeing
VPN replacement? Start with VPN replacement with your zero trust, protect your IoT devices, and then isolation technologies can be deployed. Good.
For sure.
All right, I've got another one here, and I'll throw this out to both of you guys. Why would I want? We talked about companies now with 5G looking to use wireless as their primary connectivity. Why would I want to use it as my primary instead of using a wire?
Yeah, I'll jump it. Unless you want it, Peter, I'll take that.
Go for it.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier, the organizations have been trying to get connected, and wireless, as we talked about earlier, about the need to be agile and responsive to the business. And so having now 5G with an increased bandwidth, increased capacity to run, it can match some of those speeds that were previously only capable with a wired connection. However, I've spent a lot of time working in the industry, and it takes a long time for organizations to be able to get wired connectivity if it doesn't exist. So the cost to run those cables are incredibly high if they have to go in with the backhoe, dig up the sidewalk, bring it into a building. And especially that determines on how far away that connectivity is, right? So it could be a long time, which again is going to continue to add cost, and it's going to add a lot of time as well. So if you're a business and you're thinking about, hey, I want to do a pop-up store, I want to have a kiosk, something like that, right? Not a great application for wires, any kind of temporary festival, et cetera. When you think about the temporary hospitals that were put in place, all those things, it's just not conducive to leveraging those fixed lines. So the wireless connectivity is becoming increasingly important. That also goes for remote locations as well, where it's rural areas and so forth, where it's difficult to do that. You're seeing more and more organizations turning to 5G to be able to leverage that as a primary connection for their organization rather than just a backup.
Yeah, I was at a trade show the other day when I noticed when I was checking in that they had a Cradlepoint router that they were used there in the hotel. Even though they had Wi-Fi in the hotel, they just knew that they could carry this with them and turn it on and be connected and take care of all the registration.
And Bob, how Motor City Car Wash, they had made a call to get connectivity to their spot, but we're told they'd have to wait like 2-3 weeks or so for the guy to come out with the D-Mark and plug everything in, and then contacted Cradlepoint, and within a day or so had cellular up and running.
Yeah, and that was probably someplace in the South. Imagine making that same request in the Northeast or along the northern states in the wintertime. Right. When they say, yeah, you'll have to wait until it thaws. So I mean, really can impact your ability to do that. I think another really cool area for 5G is enabling the home users to be able to take advantage of SD-WAN technology. So most people have said, there's no sense in running SD-WAN to the home because most people only have a single connection. Now with 5G and the capabilities of 5G, and especially in some of the mid-band and things like that, it gives you a viable option to run both through your fixed line ISP and through your 5G wireless as well. So it opens up a whole bunch of new possibilities for high availability and greater performance and ultimately more productivity and better experiences.
Yeah, great. Well, this is a great discussion. Let's wrap things up. We're just about the bottom of the hour. First of all, we talked about the growth of wireless WANs and some of the new opportunities that opens up for us. And we're amazed because our customers come to us every week. We hear about some new application that they're using it for, and it just simply amazes us. So use your imagination. So it gives you obviously the flexible connectivity. Now, by adding the security, the SASE secret sauce that we talked about today, that gives you not only the flexibility, but this confidence in knowing that it's secure. So take a look down the road. Now, if you're not using wireless WANs today, there's a really good chance that you'll be finding ways that you can grow your business by using wireless WANs in the near future. So a lot of places where wires just don't make sense. So I would encourage all of us that we need to be ready to embrace, to evolve, and to innovate, and then use SASE to make sure we keep it all secure. So big thanks to our panelists, Bob and Peter, today. Thanks for being with us. And to our audience, thanks for joining and taking time out of your schedule. I would say that thanks to Camille for answering a lot of the questions that have come through in the chat. Camille is my boss, so that's you're getting the good answers there. So if there's any that didn't get answered, we'll try to get back to you individually and provide answers to those questions. So thanks to all of you for joining, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Thank you.